Even though it is my primary love language, I have a really hard time receiving words of affirmation, receiving that love, taking it in from other people.
I have been able to see the effort being put in by other people and the effort that I'm putting in to have that quality time that I value. Hello, and welcome to Full Circle, the Magic Mindset Podcast. I'm Matt, one of your hosts, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Lea Lilly. We aim to bridge the gap between my study of psychology and sociology and Lea's study of astrology. So each week we discuss a specific theme and approach it from these two different perspectives to come to a deeper understanding. This podcast is about personal growth for us and for you.
If you missed out on any of our previous episodes, you can catch up at lealilly.com/fullcirclepodcast or on Spotify and iTunes by searching for Full Circle Podcast. If you haven't listened to part one of this two-part series of episodes yet, you'll want to go back and do so. But we're going to do a quick recap of what we talked about in that first episode now, and we're going to do it in 30 seconds. Matt and I each have 30 seconds to talk about the takeaways from that first episode that are important as we move forward with today's episode. So, Matt, are you ready?
Let's do it.
I will count you in. 3, 2, 1.
As any romantic comedy movie will tell you, love is complicated, and psychology agrees. For me, understanding the feeling of love is the first step. And then the second step is where the theme actually comes in, which is love languages. So there's 5 of them. And it's important to understand what your love language is and to understand what the other person's love language is so that you two can communicate these very complex feelings appropriately. So I know I'm a tough act to follow, Lea, but let's see how you do. I'll count you in from 3. 3, 2, 1.
Once you understand your love language, you can use astrology in addition to really hone in on more specific details surrounding giving and receiving love. Venus and Mars are going to be the easiest places to start with in looking at your astrology. So beginning to understand your placements of both Venus and Mars is going to help you add more specificity to your love language knowledge and make it more personal.
Here's the mail, it never fails and makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, I want to wail. Mail! Do you know that song? You know it from Blue's Clues, right?
Yeah, dude. I'm just so proud of the way you committed to it and then just sang it. It was awesome.
Lea says that I'm not allowed to say that this segment is my favorite segment because she says that I say it about every segment that we do, which is probably true. But I do really enjoy this particular segment, which only occurs in week 2 because I like hearing from the listeners. And Lea, I know that you do too.
I do.
Lea, I know that we got quite a few responses to our question this week about what our listeners' love languages were through the show's social media. Do you want to share a couple of those?
Yeah. I had a friend message me a screenshot of her breakdown, and it was so nice because under that she shared that no wonder when we get together, we spend a lot of time together, like the hours just pass and we look at the clock and we can't believe how much time has passed since we've been together. She said, no wonder that happens for us. It's my primary love language, and I appreciate the time that we get to spend when we do that. And it was cool to know that without even really knowing that about her, that that was her primary love language, I was speaking that to her, and that was really cool to find out this week.
In high empathy people, which I believe that you are, it's interesting to see how you naturally pick up on those things without even necessarily knowing, right? Because like love languages as a concept is relatively new, but it's obviously been in our lives before that, right? And so clearly we were able to communicate that with some level of success before. And so I think it's really interesting to see those high empathy people and how they almost just absorb the other people's primary love languages and are able to send that back to them.
And I love that you mentioned that that's a gift of high empathy people, because I also feel like high empathy can be associated with like a lot of the negative emotional burden sort of parts that high empathy can get into. So to have that gift is really special, like you said, of absorbing somebody else's love language and being able to sort of speak it to them. Did you have any responses that you were particularly drawn to this week?
I did. Yeah, we had one come through from a friend of the show, Claire, and she had mentioned that her top two love languages had flip-flopped. And maybe this needs to wait until the case study section where we talk about individual experiences, but I'm interested to hear what you think makes them flip-flop, because it's so interesting to me to have those top two and then like all of a sudden, boom, here we go. And then another question that comes from the same set of love languages that Claire shared, you and I had like far and away top ones, top love languages, and some at the bottom, like gifts that like we didn't care about at all. And hers were all right around the same strength. And I'm wondering what you would say that means about her approach to love.
It's a really good question. I think the equalness of number across the board, like you were saying, they were all very close, very similar. To me, that indicates being like very open to love in whatever forms it wants to come. And that to me is a gift. And what does it mean that they flip flopped? I think what we need changes based on our environment, based on the people we're around, based on the love that we're getting, and at different times in our lives. It's interesting to hear about Claire's experience because mine, the first time I took this to now, didn't really change. But to hear that those top two flip flop for her and that they're all very close in number is a unique experience. And what it prompts for me is like I want to look into her astrology and see what's going on in her chart and where her Venus is and where her Mars is, because I think that's where my part of the expertise of what we provide here comes into play, of looking at how we make those more personal to Claire by looking at her astrology.
I think I agree. I think I like what you said about all of them being about equal strength and just being open to what the world has to offer. I think that's really, really an interesting approach. And I do think one of the benefits to taking the test, the quiz, more than once is that you do get to see how those small changes are affecting you. And it's something that we see a lot in psychology, is that you'll test over time. You'll take like a strength finders test, and then you shouldn't take it again for a long time. But like, if you have some sort of life event, like you have children or you get married or, maybe you move for your job, something like that, then you should take the strength finders test again, because the changes in your environment change the way you approach things. And I think that has to be true for love as well. So yeah, maybe there are just some things going on within the environment that would help you change the way that you view those aspects of your life.
Now comes the part of our episode where we get to look at what's going on in the cosmos. If you are listening to our podcast on release day on Monday, it is the first full day of Libra season. And there are a lot of characteristics of Libra, and we're going to explore a few more of them over the weeks to come. But perhaps one of the most easily recognizable characteristics, or one that's easy to associate with Libra, is balance. So after the head down, hard work mode of Virgo, Libra season energy encourages us to balance out. And this is not just going to be around our work, but in any area of our lives where we're feeling drained or stagnant or heavy, or like something's just off. So over this first week of Libra season, I encourage you to just observe where a little more balance might serve you in your life. And just notice the places that need more balance without judging them, and maybe write them down to keep in mind over the next month. Better balance will just naturally be the energy in the air, but it never hurts to put some active effort in addition to that. We're also going to see a new moon in Libra this week on Saturday, September 28th. It's a super new moon. It will happen at 1:26 p.m. and that's Central Time. So based on your time zone, it's going to be a little bit different. The new moon in Libra calls us to look at our relationships and balancing our relationships, strengthening our partnerships, and also looking at promoting harmony, how we can access more harmony in our lives. So how can you make an effort to appreciate and understand your partners and your partnerships? And if you're not in one or don't have any good partnerships that you're like, I want to take a look at this, how can you get clear with yourself on what you want or do need in partnerships and friendships? So looking at relationships across the board, not just romantic, but also platonic relationships, friendships, even with your family, and creating a little bit more team spirit, recognizing that others are our teammates. They're not out to sabotage us. We're all just doing the best we can to be happy and feel loved. So recognizing that in other people to create a little bit more balance in love across the board in all of your relationships. New moons are great times to set intentions. So setting intentions around partnership, friendship, and relationships will be especially potent over the weekend. Our featured business this week is Blacklisted Bandits & Co. This apparel business, started by sister and brother team Nick and Demi Peterson, wants to help us break out of the fashion molds that are too small and have been for too many years. Not anymore. They believe that true acceptance and comfort start from within and are the first and most important markers on your journey of stepping into your power and harnessing the truth of who you are. Blacklisted Bandits & Co. was created so your outsides can match your insides. Your body should be your comfort zone. Use code FULLCIRCLE for 25% off.
We've talked about the 5 love languages, of which one is gifts. And what better gift than some of the awesome apparel on Blacklisted Bandits & Co. website? I know that in the past, and we'll talk about this during the case study section coming up next, I know for me, the gift love language is pretty low on the totem pole, so I have struggled in the past to communicate in that way, but I don't need to struggle anymore. Now I've got Blacklisted Bandits & Co. Lea, what time is it?
Summertime.
No, it's case study time. Here we go.
So sitting with love languages over this past week, sitting with that concept, sitting with knowing what yours are, what did that bring up for you?
I spent most of my time thinking about the top 3 since the other 2 were distant 4th and 5th. And just as a reminder, my top 3 were quality time, physical touch, and words of affirmation. And Leigh, I think it's time for a choose your own adventure, because one of them I have a really firm grasp on and know exactly what it means. One of them I think has a pretty ridiculous story associated with it. And one of them, I have no idea why it's one of my top 3 love languages. And even when I was trying to explore it, I still don't understand why it's one of my top ones. I still don't get it.
I think I want to know which one you have the least grasp on, that one that you mentioned.
That one for me is words of affirmation. I think I have a really solid handle on why quality time and physical touch are important to me. But when I think about me and the way that I approach any relationship, and I would remind everybody that we're not just talking about romantic relationships, I don't know that I put a lot of stock in what is said. It's more to me about like knowing that the underlying feeling is there.
I think that's interesting though, because we've been communicating for 10 years, over 10 years. And I feel like what I know of you, words are important to you. Like you are a really, really good communicator. When I think of you, I think one of the things that like comes to mind is your ability to talk and conversate and make things understood, and you're a captivating speaker. So it's interesting to me that words don't connect with you as much.
I think that they do connect. It's important to me that any relationship I have, and if you look at the people that I've been friends with the longest, the people that I choose to be in romantic relationships with, all of that stuff, like we can have a good conversation. Like that's important. But I think to me, like if somebody is communicating affection, to me, the word part does not seem as important.
I think it's interesting to know that that doesn't necessarily resonate with you, but then when we look at your astrology and how that applies specifically to you, I think you also really value, and you can totally correct me if I'm wrong, but in, a relationship, whether it's a friendship, partnership, whatever, having really good, fascinating, intellectually stimulating conversations, that's really important to you. Would you say that that's true?
I would. I would. I think when you look at the relationships that I've had that are most successful, whether it be the longest friendships, the people that I choose to be in romantic relationships with, I am able to have a good conversation, and either they make me think about things in ways that I didn't before, or they can make me genuinely laugh. Things like that are important to me. But I guess to me, when I think about love languages, I'm setting that aside. Like to me, like everybody wants to have a good conversation, right? And so then that would mean that everybody has words of affirmation. And we know from our listeners this week that that's not true. I think to me, that's why it doesn't resonate as a love language, is because it's a base expectation of being in a positive relationship, again, whether that be platonic, romantic, or otherwise.
But I also think that touches on something deeper, which is good communication in relationships. So I would say on that foot, I definitely agree. Like, good communication is necessary for any relationship. But I think where we start to leave good communication and approach words of affirmation love language is when you can not only communicate well in a relationship, but then also communicate the way you feel about how much you value that partnership, how much you value the fact that you're like able to communicate and be open, like be able to say that. Like, I see that we have this really valuable thing, and I'm talking to you about how I recognize it and how I recognize your part in it, and you're doing a really good job at it. What you've said is making me wonder about words of affirmation as a love language, because it is rooted and based in communication and having good communication. And I do now wonder, is that something we all want in our relationships? Isn't it? Isn't that a foundational element?
Yeah, I think when you think about like if you were going to write the most generic Tinder profile in the world, it's I need someone who can make me laugh and have a good conversation. Like that's the most basic way to ask for love there is, right? Like to me, everybody wants to be able to talk, and I think a good conversation is different to some people than others, but I think that everybody wants a good conversation, right? Like especially like in a romantic relationship, or no, not even especially in any relationship. I think you plan on that relationship lasting for some length of time, and during that time you want to be able to talk to the person. You want to be able to enjoy the time that you have with them. So to me it's a fundamental requirement. And maybe you're right. Maybe it is not a fundamental requirement for everybody, in which case, heck yeah, words of affirmation is my love language, because I do need that. But to me, it feels so foundational that that's why I was so perplexed, I guess, by the love language itself.
The question that the love language quiz answers is, how do you say I love you? And how do you want to be told I love you? What is the modality that you want and feel that love coming to you? And so I think that's where words of affirmation is like people who value that praise in a way.
I could see that. I think it still doesn't resonate with me as one of my love languages, but I think that it sparks an interesting question, which is for somebody like me who the quiz told me my love languages were these specific ones, but clearly one of them does not resonate with me. What do you think that that does to our approach? Like if I receive words of affirmation, do you think like it's just going to trigger myself, my subconscious, and I'll be like, oh yeah, like I totally understand what this person is saying? Or do you think the conscious mind wins out and says, nope, I was right. Words of affirmation is not one of my top three?
I think noticing when that happens, noticing when that dissonance comes up, like you said, one of the results of the quiz did not resonate with how you feel. Sitting with that for like a week and noticing where and if it comes up. So, like words of affirmation, are you receiving them? Does it mean something to you? Do you give them out? Just noticing it more, increasing awareness around it. Because to get it on the quiz, to me, that says something. You know what I mean? Like, why would that come up if it wasn't on your radar or part of how you receive or give love?
I'm interested more in your week sitting with this particular topic.
It's interesting that you mentioned words of affirmation because that is my primary love language. And I, in sitting with love languages over the week, have been thinking a lot about that and noticed that even though it is my primary love language, I have a really hard time receiving words of affirmation, receiving that love, taking it in from other people.
Why don't you put some specifics around that?
Like when somebody gives me a compliment, it genuinely used to make me very uncomfortable because I didn't know what to say or do because I think when I get a compliment, it is a really overwhelming feeling that somebody would think of something nice and then, say that to me and share that with me. And that makes my heart swell. And so, how do you communicate that feeling to somebody? And thank you sometimes just doesn't seem to cut it.
So for you, it's more of not the act of receiving because that I mean, you know that makes you feel good, but it's more the act of like, how do I respond? Like this person has opened up this amazing feeling. How do I reciprocate that? And you don't feel like, thank you or some other gratitude is enough.
Yes. Whereas before it was find a way to deny it or find a way to turn it around so that I don't have to deal with finding a way to reciprocate that feeling, exactly like you just kind of summed up so well. And I think a lot of people that I compliment because I speak words of affirmation fluently, I'm good at it. I notice the way in which people receive the compliments that I give them. And it's interesting to me to notice when somebody will deny it or they'll be like, no, you are, so that they don't have to let that love kind of penetrate their heart.
Do you think that pushback is less of the, heart being unwilling to accept it, and it's more of the mind saying like, hey, you're not worth whatever this is? Like it's a confidence or a self-esteem issue?
Yeah, definitely. Because when we don't think of ourselves that way, we can't accept that compliment from somebody else. So it goes back to, okay, well, what do you think of yourself? And if people are telling you things that you think you're not worthy of, then your brain is going to shut that out and not let you receive it.
Spoiler alert, I'm super pumped for the psychological wellness tip today. It's going to tie in really, really well with what you just said.
Do you feel like in your life right now you're receiving your top 3 love languages from different sources?
I think that it's an interesting question. I wonder if I had taken this quiz 6 months ago, if my love languages would have been different. Podcast listeners might not know, I moved halfway across the world several months ago for work and will be here for a little while. And when you move that far away from what you would consider home, it definitely changes the way that you need to balance your love languages. Being thousands and thousands of miles away, of course, physical touch is non-existent, right? I'm not with those people on a day-to-day basis. So it it can't possibly exist. But I think that you balance that by, in my case, really prioritizing quality time. So it's not uncommon for me to wake up at 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning to spend some quality time with somebody back home that is just starting their evening. I do it multiple times a week just so that I can, continue to have that relationship and enjoy that quality time together. And I appreciate the people back home that are, taking the time to say, hey, this person is important to me. I'm going to take time out of my day to spend that quality time. And so I think as I sat with quality time over the last week, that one makes a lot of sense to me versus like words of affirmation, which didn't so much. I think that I have been able to see the effort being put in by other people and the effort that I'm putting in to have that quality time that I value. Does that answer your question?
Definitely. I wonder if your results would have been different too, having taken it 6 months ago versus now. And I wonder in a year what taking it again will reveal. I'm very interested in sort of like you said and you touched on earlier, those different periods of our lives that we go through and how they change us and then, change the things around us, like how we receive love and our love languages and all of that.
Lea, last time we talked about acts of service being pretty low on your love language totem pole. Let's talk a little bit about gifts. I think it had 1 point for you, and it only had a couple for me. What do you think it is about gifts that just really does not click for you?
I think it's that I just don't really want physical things as a representation of somebody's affection or love for me. Things are great. Having things is great. Like, don't get me wrong. I like pretty things. My office space is like one of my favorite spaces. It's got like a lot of beautiful, like little things that I love. And some of them were gifted to me and they were wonderful gifts because they see the person you are. And so I love hearing that in words the most. And then spending quality time with people that think that of me, that sort of thing. So when it goes down the list, like gifts is going to be last because a physical representation of that doesn't mean as much to me as some of the other things do. What were your takeaways from the past 2 weeks sitting with love languages? What are you taking away?
There are two things that I value above all else in relationships, and one of them is communication. So to me, in this case, it's all about communication. It's not necessarily even about speaking the same language, but more about understanding that there are different languages to speak in the first place. Once you have that shared understanding, I think it's a lot easier to have empathy for the other person and understand where they're coming from. So even if you're not speaking the same language, at least you can respect that, like, they are communicating their feelings.
I love that. And just to sort of add on to that, knowing what your love languages are and knowing the people around you that you care about, what their love languages are, getting that clarity can really start to balance some of your relationships. As we move into Libra season, this is a really good time to look at balance in relationships, two things that are associated with Libra. So knowing your love language, knowing the love language of those around you so that you can create equilibrium and harmony in your relationships. And if you want to go even further with that, diving into the birth chart to make it more personal, looking at your Mars, looking at your Venus, understanding yourself at a deeper level. Because when you understand yourself in your own love language, you show other people just naturally how to love you when you can provide that for yourself. So the first step really is taking a look at yourself and understanding what it is that you need in terms of self-love.
That idea of self-love fits in really nicely with today's psychological wellness tip. I wanted to finish up today with the last of the 6 pillars from Carol Riff's theory of psychological well-being. And originally I thought I was going to have to stretch a little bit to make this last one work, but I think it fits really nicely into this conversation. The last pillar is autonomy. We've talked so much the last 2 weeks about how we love others and how we communicate that love. But this week, I'd like you to take a step back and love yourself. We are all awesome in our own way, and I think it's time to respect that and give ourselves the love that we deserve.
And the Knight of Pentacles is our tarot pull for this week, reminding us to take our time and go step by step. Changing the ways that we give and receive love or show love to ourselves isn't going to happen overnight. So it's about forming habits and being gentle with and kind to yourself as you do so. Be patient, practice showing up responsibly and steadily for yourself, and keep your vision in mind. Stay true to it, because the changes you want to see will happen. You just have to practice being patient and going step by step and giving yourself that grace and openness to cultivate that self-love, that love for others, whatever it is. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Full Circle, the Magic Mindset Podcast. If you want to learn more about us or hear previous episodes, you can visit lealily.com/Full Circle Podcast. There you can find previous episodes and also our show notes, where we include previous tarot pulls, links, and more extras from each of our episodes. You can also engage with us on Twitter at @fullcircle_POD. And we also have a community on Facebook under Full Circle, the Magic Mindset Podcast, where we hope to communicate and talk with you. You can share your insights, your thoughts on our themes, and more in that community. If you want to listen to more of our episodes, we are on Spotify and iTunes, and also on my website. We release new episodes every Monday. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.